Yeah, I used to work for UPS. That was a terrible job, by the way.
Oh, I did for like 2 weeks,
Oh man.
and then I got knocked unconscious in the back of a truck. A package fell off the top and hit me in the back of
Oh.
the head and knocked me out. And
Oh man.
Jesus.
And
I
then you
woke
wake
up.
up and there's like boxes coming down the line,
Yeah,
right?
they didn't even know it. They didn't even know. I got knocked out. I woke up and the whole truck was full of boxes. They were like laying on my legs, and nobody even knew. I walked out of
I'm
the truck.
surprised because if you're backed up and the sorters are up top, they'll be like, "Hey, pick it up, Shane."
What's up, guys, and welcome to episode 42 of Podcast Reload. It's the general gaming podcast by SIFTD.net subscribers, where we invite community guests onto the show to talk about the games industry in all its weird ways. I am your host, Vin Hill, and joining me as always is, of course, my co-host and not fellow Japan dweller, the sole Japan dweller, still getting used to not saying that, Evan Piotrowski.
Hello, everyone.
And joining us this week, we've got a very, very special guest, because all of our SIFTD readers, I should say, will obviously know the man himself, Shane Satterfield.
Hey.
Hey. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Weekend after E3, just trying to decompress. It was a long slog getting through E3. It's like every year it's another day longer, and that's just one other day that I don't want it to be. So it's
Yeah.
I worked all day yesterday too. It's like on Friday we did the show for our best of E3, and then I had to go through all the process of rendering all that and posting that. And then yesterday just started doing catch up. We did our E3 show floor walkthrough, put up a photo gallery from all the photos we snapped from there. Now today I'm talking with you guys. So for me, E3 really has not ended. I'm still on that train. So
Still on the train.
Yep.
Well, it's only going to get worse with these public people coming in now. You know, you're no longer just journalists there, right?
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot busier. It was a lot harder to get around and see everything you wanted to. I actually spent the bulk of my time on Thursday, which was by far the least trafficked day at the show. So I was a little strategic. Like, I saw the big stuff like the first couple days when I only had a couple hours to go. And then on Thursday, it was like mop-up duty, and I was able to get through everything pretty quickly. So ultimately, it worked out, but yeah, it was certainly the busiest E3 they've ever had. I think it was up 20,000 people from last year, and they only let 15,000 people in as sort of the fans or the gamers. So another 5,000 people came from the industry that weren't there last year. So it was more than just extra people as far as the fans being let in. There was more industry people there as well. So yeah, it was. It was pretty crazy, man, especially on Tuesday and Wednesday. It was Tuesday was just it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I remember because like I went to Tokyo Game Show a couple of years ago, and that's just pretty much public only. There's hardly any developers or journalists walking around that place anymore. But I just remember thinking back on that and thinking, God, I hope it doesn't become like that for E3, because that place used to be a nightmare to get around.
E3 was not as bad as public days at TGS. I would say public days at TGS, we wouldn't even go. I mean, because TGS would give you like a day and a half of press and industry only, and you could go in there and get everything done, because the show's not that big, especially now. It's really puny compared to how it used to be. But we were such a well-oiled machine at GT, we could roll into Tokyo Game Show and get everything in like a day and a half. And then like usually the people who had never been to Japan before and were going on the trip for the first time, they would go back on the public day. But people who had been doing it for a long time, like me and some of our camera guys, like, man, we just take Saturday and we go shopping in Harajuku, or go eat at our favorite restaurant, or go to Akihabara and look for some old games or whatever. But yeah, the noobs would always go back, and then we'd see them that night and be like, now we know why you guys don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
But
no, I don't blame
E3 did
them.
not get as bad as that this year. Even on Tuesday, it wasn't as bad as public days at TGS.
Yeah, because like the only major complaint which I heard from a lot of journalists, including you and Matt, actually, I think you mentioned the fact that there was just not that much to do for the public. You know, like there wasn't any crazy events. Obviously, they had the Coliseum, but it wasn't attached to the show floor and stuff. So hopefully they'll get on top of that over the next few years.
Yeah, one thing about
That's
Tokyo
still in
Game
LA.
Show, I mean, you may love it or you may hate it, but the other thing TGS does that E3 doesn't do is elaborate stage shows. So,
Right.
like a Tokyo Game Show, like the Ubisoft did it for Just Dance. It had like a little dance number on its stage or whatever, but that was something they did once. Like a Tokyo Game Show, when you go there, every stage has a schedule, and it's not just like a guy sitting there talking about his game. Like, they come up on stage, they demo the
it's a full
game.
thing.
There's some elaborate like dance number or something that happens, and so there are things there. Even if you don't want to wait in line for people to do a Tokyo Game Show, you can just go mill around the stage and you can watch a presentation. A lot of that stuff doesn't really happen at E3, so it'll be interesting to see if the ESA kind of takes a look at the other shows around the globe and takes it a little more to heart. I feel like the ESA almost has a little bit of an ego, and that it feels like, oh, we have the best show and we know what we're doing. And if we didn't know what we were doing, we wouldn't have like the show that everyone says is the most important show, and we wouldn't have the show where the most games are debuted every year. So I think, a lot of the guys in the ESA have been there for a really long time, and I think in a lot of ways they're kind of resting on their laurels a little bit. Yeah. I think a good analogy I have for that is when I first started working at MTV, I would go into meetings, and a lot of the people in the meetings had been at MTV since the 80s, and it was the channel in the entire world, and it had this great reputation, and it just massive ratings, and everything they touched turned to gold. They created the real world, created reality television. But, now they're like 70. And so you're sitting in meetings where you're trying to work through a digital strategy, because I worked in digital, and you're trying to explain, how social media can impact things, and they don't get it, and they don't want to get it. So I feel like the ESA is kind of in that same space right now, where there's a lot of kind of people in there who don't really get the whole YouTuber streamer thing, don't get the influencers thing, don't really get how the industry is evolving, and don't really care to. They've done very well for themselves, doing the same things that they've always been doing. But, as the old saying goes, evolve or die. And I think E3 is kind of in that place right now where it needs to evolve. And I don't think it needs to be exactly like every other trade show, because then you lose your unique selling proposition, your USP. But it needs to, I think the baby steps it took this year towards being like other conferences needs to be strides. And I feel like if it doesn't take a stride next year, and again, it takes baby steps, I think you might see it falling into irrelevance. And ultimately, who controls whether E3 is irrelevant or relevant is the publishers. If the publishers aren't there, E3 is nothing. And I think we're seeing, with EA leaving the show and a couple other publishers dialing back, like Take-Two's booth this year was literally like the size of a trailer.
Yeah, I heard it was really small.
And I think you're starting to see, not just EA start to pull back a little bit. You're starting to see some of the other guys. And if that happens, there's nothing the ESA can do to save E3. So it needs to accelerate its march towards the modern age of how people are covering and consuming content around video games. And I don't think it can take the same baby step next year and survive unscathed, kind of how it did this year.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what they do moving forward. Actually, as a side note, Shane, and you were talking about at the Tokyo Game Show, they kind of have like stages set up so you can actually spend some time doing that instead of waiting in lines. I actually went to Bit Summit this year. That small,
the indie show in Japan,
yeah, and so it was interesting because a very, very small venue, obviously for a show. It's in its fifth year.
Doesn't James Milkey run that? Milkman, the old Milkman from EGM. I think that's his show.
I think maybe. I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to say yes or no. You're probably right. It's a cool show. I like it's really small. It's like 6,000 people go to that thing, so you're not really waiting in line for a lot of stuff. But they did have a stage in the middle, and it is kind of cool when they do unique stuff. Like they actually had Suda 51 versus Koji Igarashi in like a quiz game, where they were giving him questions.
That's great.
And so it's like something like that. It's like, this is totally dumb, and they're both like they were like eating it up. They're chewing the scenery with their answers and stuff like that. It was silly.
There are a
was
couple
fun.
of characters though. That must be great.
Totally, yeah. And they
but
had a
that's where
couple
you
other
really
people
need
on.
to know them. It's when you're watching these canned interviews with these guys, you don't really know what kind of people they are, and if they have a sense of humor, and if they're fun, or if they're really stodgy. Like Iga typically is kind of stoic. He's not.
Right.
I've interviewed him probably 20 times throughout my career, and he's a hard nut to crack as far as like getting him kind of on your side so that he'll have fun with the interviews. Suda 51 is the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, he's the guy that you're like, dude, like, I need to get something relevant out of you, because he'll fly off on tangents and he thinks that they're really funny stories or whatever. And whether it's lost in translation or the story just isn't funny,
Right.
At a certain point, you're like, okay, I get it. You're Suda51. You're crazy. You're wacky. A lot of people love you for that. But
Yeah,
like,
tell us about your game.
I need some. I need some content out of this, bro. So it's always interesting dealing with those guys. But no matter what, when you do things like that, you really get to know kind of the personality behind the people who are making these games. And that's something that E3 could use more of, in all honesty, because a lot of these, even when these, like Bethesda had like a stage, but all it did was just one-on-one interviews with the developers, and the audio was really low. You couldn't hear what they were saying, and consequently, you walk by, and there was literally like 8 people watching each one of those things. So I think the publishers could learn a lot from TGS, and the ESA could learn a lot from it as well.
Yep. So hopefully it sort of evolves over the next few years, because none of us want to see E3 go away in any capacity, so fingers crossed.
I just don't want to see it leave Los Angeles, to be honest with you.
Right, yeah. It's like you were saying, the mayor might even step in and sort that out, because it's a huge, massive income boost for the people of LA, at least,
Oh, I can guarantee you that as soon as the mayor of Los Angeles saw that story, he called the ESA immediately and then called the convention center and said, yo, we have a meeting on Monday about this, because it is, and it's hard to believe when you think about Los Angeles, but E3 is the #1 money generator, revenue generator for any convention in Los Angeles, period. It just drives like hundreds of millions of dollars into LA's economy, and I don't really care about that part of it. I just like the fact that I can get in my car and drive 20 minutes and I'm there.
Yeah.
But
it's good for you. You're in like the best spot for it, I guess.
Yeah. I'm in the catbird seat living here. I mean, even the rest of the press, they all have to come down from San Francisco, and they live in hotels for a week, and you have to bring all your gear down. Like, it's in our home court, and I hope it stays that way. But I think I was kind of surprised to hear the ESA say that it felt the facilities, the LA Convention Center, were not up to scratch. That's their big complaint. And I mean, you go in there, and when you walk in E3, it's not like you walk through that convention center, you're like, oh my God, this place is a dump and it's outdated. I mean, if there's one criticism, it's that the bathrooms are terrible.
Right. I think that's any convention, though. Like, I've never been to a good bathroom at any convention.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that they're old or run down or anything. There's just no ventilation. So you literally walk in there and you need like a gas mask. It is that freaking,
the wall of crap, literally.
It really is. Like, it's noticeable. Like, I've been to a lot of conventions, and E3, you walk in the bathroom and you want to gag. Like, it's that bad.
Right. Oh.
But other than that, I mean, I think maybe part of it might be broadband. Because think about the broadband requirements for E3 now. Back in the day, as long as you had Wi-Fi or whatever, and like the PR people could get on the Wi-Fi and check their email, it was fine. But now, every single game, almost every game is connected in some way, and you have to demo that. And so you start thinking about, okay, you have Call of Duty World War II with 60 kiosks. You have right next to that Destiny 2 with 60 kiosks. That's just Activision's booth alone. And so you start thinking about the broadband requirements, the bandwidth requirements, to make sure that these games not only work, but work well. Because if you're Activision and you're like showing these 2 games that are basically driven by their online play, and if you're getting lag, I mean, that's a deal breaker. That's Activision after the show going to the ESA and saying, look, like, you don't get this fixed, we're not coming back. This is how we make our money, off our online modes on our games. And if we cannot have people coming to check out our games and reporting on them and criticizing them.
Yeah, because they'll be like, oh, it's bad netcode or something.
Yeah.
It's screwed. Because that is a criticism that Battlefield gets every single year. And half the time isn't even true. But if someone goes to the show and plays that and they're like, yeah, it's got bad netcode, then that's a criticism, and they're going to get marked down for points on that.
I just can't even fathom the infrastructure that needs to be in place for E3. Because,
I can't, it's hard to even think about.
Because the other problem, too, is that if you look at the other conventions that go in there, like they have an anime convention that goes in there. Like the other big one is the LA Car Show. But,
right.
I mean, how much... They don't need a lot of bandwidth for that. Again, it's just people checking their emails and stuff like that on Wi-Fi. So it's tough for the LA Convention Center to say, okay, I get it. You guys have these crazy requirements for bandwidth, but that's 3 days out of the year for us, And for us to invest a big chunk of cash into fixing the infrastructure, the broadband infrastructure in our convention center for one convention that's 3 days a year, and we get it. It drives them more money in 3 days than all the other ones, but that's a tough ask. And so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I can't even. I think honestly, if it does happen, it's probably going to end up in Vegas, because Vegas has been dealing with that stuff.
As long as it stays on that coast, because you've got so many developers that are based on the West Coast as well. Like there's so many guys in like Santa Monica,
then for
down
people
San Diego.
for Japan, I mean, you think about people, the industry from Japan. It's like that's a long flight for them already to just get to LA, but then you want to tack a couple more hours onto it. Imagine if it was in New York and they had to fly all the way from Japan all the way across the United States to New York City. I mean,
they probably wouldn't show up. They'll just probably say a Tokyo Game Show if that ended up like that.
Right. So there's a million reasons why I hope it stays in LA, and one of them's definitely me being selfish, but there's a lot of other better logistical reasons for that as well.
Yeah, of course. Cool. So moving on. Shane, we've got a game to play with you, man. I've been pretty excited about doing this.
I love games. I hope you got good ones for me. I love this segment of the show, so I'm excited to do it for the first time.
It's tough because you're a tough one to like figure out like what sort of games you like for the most part.
Because you play pretty much everything.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it's pretty tough. So we'll see how it goes. I've got a few random ones, so we'll see.
All right.
So we're gonna play Save or Kill. Save or Kill, if anyone listening for the first time. Is basically we take two things from the games industry. It can be a game, it could be people, it can be a studio, it can be anything. And Shane, the poor guy he is, he has to basically choose which one he has to save or kill, and that is retroactive as well. So if you kill it, it kills all the ones in the past as well. So you have to take that into account. It's not just thinking forward, if you know.
So it's like I never had the opportunity to play that franchise ever.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
fire away.
Okay, number 1, Half-Life or Diablo.
Oh, that's easy. Save Half-Life, kill Diablo.
Oh, wow. Erebus Jones is not going to be happy.
No, I get it. I'm not the world's biggest RTS player. I was into that genre a lot more as a young lad, more so than I am now. I feel like it's one of the genres that, Diablo is not really an RTS, but I feel like it gives me RTS vibes. And I'm not really into isometric action RPGs either. I'm surprised you gave me this one because you know that I'm kind of into shooters, and
I've got one of them coming up.
I think maybe you're letting me off the hook for the first one here a little bit.
But, just warming you up.
I go back to Half-Life, and I feel like Half-Life has been the far more innovative game across history. And I know there are Diablo fans who are going to hate me for that, but. If you think back to like what the first Half-Life did, kind of introducing cinematic elements into shooters, but not just shooters, like the industry in general. Like it changed the entire industry with the way it handled storytelling in real-time cinemas. Then you start thinking about all the innovative weapons that have come out of the Half-Life franchise, like the gravity gun.
Crowbar alone, yeah.
The crowbar. I mean, first-person. There's so many things that the Half-Life franchise, and in just 2 games, which is crazy to think about. But if you really start digging into the history of Half-Life, what it's done for the industry at large, I just can't really sell it. So I love Diablo. It's not like I'm a Diablo hater or whatever, but I don't feel like the industry would be drastically different now if it never existed. So I'm going Half-Life on that one.
Fair play. All right, next one. Battlefield or Call of Duty?
Oh, geez. Oh, that is a tough one.
Yep. So it's a tough one for me.
Yeah, man, I guess I'd have to say, that's so tough because my initial thought is kill Call of Duty because
it's been a while since they've had a really meaningful one, in my opinion. But
yeah, I mean, it's not even that it's been a while since we've had a really meaningful one. It's that I don't look at Call of Duty as particularly innovative ever. Like I've never looked like Call of Duty's never been the franchise that has kind of broken new ground or tried different things. It's been the king of finding small tweaks that make a big difference, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Battlefield basically created large-scale warfare with vehicles and just this. It's almost like the first MMO shooter in a lot of ways. Yeah. But as soon as I was ready to pull the trigger on saving Battlefield, I thought to myself, but look what Call of Duty has done to bring casual players into our industry.
This is true. That is a good point.
It's acted as like a Trojan horse. So it's like it's brought these people in, and then conceivably and hopefully the people who bought a console just to play Call of Duty ultimately end up buying other games. So there's like that domino effect that reverberates on throughout the rest of the industry.
Yeah, my sister's actually one of them people. She started out playing Call of Duty. I think it was World at War when she started playing,
Yeah.
and now she plays all kinds of video games. Like she's pretty much a hardcore gamer. So.
But you know what? I think ultimately I'm going to decide to save Battlefield and kill Call of Duty, because I don't know how much longer it would have taken for those kind of battles to establish themselves if it wasn't for Battlefield and the money. In all honesty, the money that EA had to do it, and the risk EA was willing to take because they could afford to. So I feel like if we just had Call of Duty and we didn't have Battlefield all that time, it would have been probably 7 years later before we even got a game like the first Battlefield. So I hate to say it. I mean, honestly, I think I've spent more time playing Call of Duty. Like the first 2 Battlefields I played, I mean, just literally hundreds of hours apiece.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how many hours I put into both of them franchises, actually.
I still remember when I worked at G4, the year Battlefield 2 came out, getting in a huge argument with Adam Sessler over Game of the Year in our Game of the Year meetings. And I ended up winning the argument, believe it or not, and it ended up being our Game of the Year for X-Play. But, man, yeah, that's a tough one. That's a really good question. You asked me a really good one there. But I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to kill Call of Duty. I'm going to save Battlefield.
Fair play. Okay, and the last one is Miyamoto or Gabe Newell?
Oh, I think that's pretty easy. You got to save Miyamoto, and you got to kill Gaben. It's not even close. I mean, Gaben is a genius in a lot of ways, and there's no denying that. But if you really think about, I always admire anyone who can create something when there's nothing. Right. And it's easy to iterate on, and maybe that's another reason why I chose Battlefield over Call of Duty. It's easy to iterate on things and look at what someone else did and then make it a little better and maybe even become more successful than the initial product. But when you're starting with a blank piece of paper and there's nothing there, and you create something that is going to influence things for decades and decades. I mean, the achievements that Miyamoto has laid down for this industry that everyone has copied and emulated for years to come. I mean, you just go on and on. The analog stick, the Z-Lock. I mean, Zelda established how the modern action-adventure game was going to be. I mean, we're still using mechanics from Ocarina of Time in games today. I mean...
Sure. A lot of action RPGs and a lot of action adventure games still utilize a lot of the stuff that they did in Ocarina of Time, I would say.
I mean, just think about side-scrolling platformers. You know, he invented that. Like,
yeah.
And it still dominates indie gaming in 2017. Yep. I mean, you go to E3, and if you look at the indie games, probably 80% of them are side-scrolling, blah, blah, blah. And without Miyamoto, you have none of that. That was the easiest one you gave me, I think.
All right, well, I have one more, if we can if we can squeeze it in.
Go for it.
This is one I thought, Vin, that you might have come up with, but Mario or Zelda?
Oh, man.
I know which one he's probably going to choose.
This one's really difficult for me as well.
Oh, man.
They're both stuck in their own ways in a lot of ways. Like, they're the same story, technically, on the same level every time, and they both utilize different mechanics every time they come out, so...
I'm going to go with... Actually, it's not that hard for me. I'm going to go with Mario.
That's what I figured.
One, Mario came first, so that gives it a leg up immediately. But two, I feel like if it wasn't for Mario, we never would have got Zelda. If it wasn't and if it wasn't for Donkey Kong, we wouldn't have got Mario. And if it weren't for Mario, we wouldn't have got Zelda. And then, the other angle for me is that I'm a gameplay guy, and I always prefer gameplay over story and things like that. And that's really what Mario is all about. It's about gameplay and just that sublime connection between the player and Mario on screen. It's like when I go to play a new Mario game at E3, one of the first things I do is I ignore everything and I just run, jump, turn, just to feel...
Oh, definitely.
Just to feel it again, because
they're always fun, though. That's the thing about Mario games. I will always give them... They're always fun.
Yeah,
like,
and
I don't think there's very few bad Mario games.
Yeah, exactly. I can't remember... Yeah, I can't... I mean, I feel like a couple of the more recent side-scrolling Mario games were kind of unnecessary.
Oh, the new Super Mario's franchise is a bit... Yeah,
like all that stuff. Like,
that's
it's
as
like
weak
whatever.
as it gets.
For Mario, yeah. But they're still actually really good games.
Oh, they're solid. All around.
And there have been Zelda games that, I actually have had points where I didn't enjoy playing them. Like Skyward Sword, there were moments where I didn't really enjoy myself all that much. And,
Yeah.
I just
Evan
think.
hates Skyward Sword. So.
Oh, good. I'm not alone
You're
on
in
that
the right
island.
company.
I don't hate
yeah.
it, but
I think that
it just felt really old when it came out. Like that to me was like the turning point where I was, and my review at GT, like I said that I'm like, this game feels old now.
Yeah.
And I got ripped for it. Oh well, you want voice acting and blah. I'm like, yes, I do. And then we get Breath of the Wild, and a lot of the things that I criticized in Skyward Sword were fixed for Breath of the Wild. I'm not saying I had any part in that. Miyamoto probably never read anything I've ever written in my life, but
Right.
I'm just saying that I was able to see the things that were wrong with Skyward Sword and where it needed to kind of move forward to make it relevant again. And ultimately, and luckily, a lot of those things ended up being in Breath of the Wild. So, yeah, it's Mario for me as a gameplay first guy. Yeah, not that
Fair
tough.
play.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's a good argument that there are, like, in general, Mario games there are more good to great Mario games than there are great Zelda games, if you want to put it that way. So.
I mean, another thing too is that we get Mario a lot more frequently than we get Zelda.
Yeah,
and yet the quality still manages to stay really high. I feel like if we had got as many Zelda games as Mario games, there would be a lot more than just Skyward Sword that we were unhappy with. So
that's true. Sure,
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But
Cool.
yeah, that's my pick.
Cool. So moving on, we're actually gonna basically do E3, but we're not gonna do what we did last year stupidly, where we went through each of the conferences talking about all the games. It ended up being was it like 3 hours long or something, Evan? It was
It was too long.
Yeah, it was. We had to cut it down into like 2 episodes. Also, it was a mess. So this year we're gonna basically take 3 games each, and we're gonna talk about each one for 5 minutes, and that's basically it. So they're all personal picks as well. They're not political. It's not about who everyone's favorite game was going to be. It's just about how we felt about them personally. So, should we kick off with our guest, Shane? Do you want to take us off first? What's your first pick for one of your favorite games that you saw at E3?
Well, one thing I want to say just before I start is that, we just did our Best of E3 episode on Game Face, and so I don't want to just sit here and kind of regurgitate the same stuff I said on that show.
Yeah, choose something different then if you want.
So I'm going to stray into some games that I saw at the show that wouldn't necessarily win an award, although the first one I'm going to talk about maybe does, in hindsight, deserve more recognition than it's got. But I want to talk about different games than what I've talked about on our Best of E3. So the first game I'm going to talk about is a game called Hunt Showdown. Have you guys heard of this game?
I have not.
No.
I'm going to have to Google this one while you're talking about it.
So this is a shooter from Crytek, and it was originally started by Crytek US like way back in 2014. And eventually the game was canceled by that studio, and then Crytek proper picked it up for development. And it is, in hindsight, I really should have mentioned this on our show because it really was one of the most memorable games I played at E3. So it's an asymmetrical multiplayer game. And I know a lot of times when I say that, immediately people are like, ew, because I remember games like Evolve or whatever. This is really the first game, at least the first asymmetrical shooter that I've played that is really, really doing things the right way. So essentially,
this does look really cool. I'll give them that. Like the screenshots I'm looking at, it looks really cool. So everyone should go pick it up.
Yeah, it's totally been flying under the radar. And I think they just finally put out the first demo from E3 today, and we're gonna have that curated on the site here. Probably by the time people will hear it, they'll be able to watch it. So
yeah. Essentially
what it is an asymmetrical multiplayer game, and there are up to 5 teams of 2 players. And so the whole object of the game is that with every match, there's one boss that you need to kill. And it's kind of a race to kill the boss, but before you discover what the boss is or where it is, there are all these sort of rank and file enemies in the environment. And the game is really dark. Like, it's so dark that you use matches to see. So you strike a match, and it's permadeath. So if you die, you're done. And your partner can revive you, but once you're both dead, you're out of the match. So it's not just trying to find out where the boss is to kill the boss. It's also keeping an eye on the other 5 teams of 2 that are in the map with you. And anytime they fire a gun or strike a match, it's so dark that you'll notice it. And so as soon as someone strikes a match, you're like, oh, they're over there. So you start making your way over there. Of course, while you're on your way over there, you're fighting all the enemies that have spawned. And then it's not just like all zombies. Like, there are some like mid-range enemies that you come into contact with where you have to actually like band together to take down the enemy, and then your cover's completely blown, and the other teams are going to be coming at you. So you're trying to take down this kind of mid-boss while knowing there are 4 other teams of 2 that are coming for you to try to kill you. So as you play the match, it starts to give you clues as to what the boss is, and two, where the boss is. And so you kind of go through this cycle with all the other teams, and you hope you survive through that until one team discovers the boss. And then once the team discovers the boss, everybody gets alerted to where the boss is. So once that happens, all the teams converge on the boss. And
okay, that's cool. That's cool that everyone gets notified about the boss.
And this is where it gets crazy, because once you get into this fight, do you fight the boss, or do you try to drop the other players? Because if you drop the other players, it makes it harder to kill the boss. So it's this whole mental juggling thing that goes on. And then once you kill the boss, it's not over. You have to essentially cleanse the boss. So once you kill him, then it turns into like a horde mode against the other teams that are left. So
interesting. Yeah.
If you're the team that manages to drop the boss, any of the other players left suddenly try to kill you. It turns into a horde mode where everyone's trying to kill you, and you're trying to, I think it's not very long. It's like a 20-second timer or something like that, where you have to actually kind of survive the other teams. And once you do that, you have to escape. So even if you defeat that boss, you make it through the timer, it's kind of like the Division, in that you need to get to a drop point where you get taken out. And so, players can hide. That's the thing. Like, so once you take down the boss, some of those teams can go hide in the woods where it's pitch black. And they'll maybe wait for that timer to click down, and you've kind of raised the boss or whatever. And then when you're trying to get to the extraction point, they can pop out and kill you. So
super interesting.
It's crazy. I literally totally regret not kind of nominating this game for some kind of an award, or even giving it an award. I don't know why. It's like you see so many games at E3 that sometimes things start to get jumbled together. And in hindsight, after coming back from the show, this is one of the games that I feel like deserved to be recognized far more than it was.
Yeah, great pick, man. Yeah, like, I don't even know. Is it coming out on the consoles as well, or is it just PC at this point?
Right now, they're just showing it on PC, and that's the other part of it too. It is absolutely freaking gorgeous, and
yeah, it looks absolutely incredible
and terrifying. I mean, it is just so scary because it is so dark, and you're not just worrying about the other teams; you're also worrying about all the enemies and the zombies that are littering the environment. So you don't know where the danger is always coming from, and it's also unique to play a game where one person striking a match can just set off this chain reaction of action. So I'm really hyped on this game. I don't know why it didn't have more of a presence at E3. It was kind of one of those things where I was in a booth, and they're like, "Hey, we've got this game that people are really talking about. You might want to come and see it." And I knew of the game. I knew that it existed. I knew about the game from back in 2014. It sounded like a unique idea back then, and I was like, sure. I had kind of like played everything I wanted to play at that point, was just kind of looking for table scraps like this, and it ended up being far more than a table scrap. So right now, just announced for PC. I would not be shocked at all if it's announced for consoles, in the next few months. So hopefully it gets a good reception out of the show. It deserves it.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I didn't even hear about this game until I've just looked it up, and you've just been talking about it. But
yeah, neither did I.
You've sold me on it for sure.
It's cool.
So, yeah, cool. So, Evan, what's your first pick, man?
This is a hard one because this is my third pick. There are two standout games, and my last one, I didn't really know what to pick. There's a lot of, it seems like some games coming out, they're just kind of like, yeah, it's another one of those, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like Lost Legacy, it's definitely Uncharted. Assassin's Creed Origins, it's definitely Assassin's Creed, although obviously they've revamped the combat, which I'm interested in, but sure. I think it's kind of moving away from the idea of assassination and more about, you know what I mean, like actually fighting, which I don't know. I don't know how to parse that in my brain. Far Cry 5 looks a lot like the idea of Far Cry 5 was so interesting, and those
now it's not as interesting, is it?
No, it's not. Like those teasers were so creepy and unsettling. I'm like, oh, they're taking this in a direction. Like I even tweeted, I was like, I'm really, really hyped for this reveal trailer of Far Cry 5, and even that was like, oh, okay, like the guy like carving Sinner into his arm is a bit on the nose, but we'll figure it out, or we'll see more. And then just coming away from E3, I just hear like, it's Far Cry 5. You are doing the exact same things. It's just texture change. But let's see where the story takes it. Let's see if the enemies or the main father guy is as memorable as some of the previous games. But
they really nerfed that game at E3. It kind of lost all its edge.
Yeah.
The more they showed of it, the less controversial it became, the less, I think, interesting it became, the less edgy it became.
I
mean,
think
if
they're
you
trying to
look
find the comedy in it too much. I think that's a main problem. Like, they don't.
Well,
the problem is that the game's like done, so it's like they can't go back and say, "Oh my gosh, everybody was so into the concept of this game." It's too late for them to go back and kind of refocus it and kind of have that more serious angle or bent towards it. It is what it is at this point, and I mean, I kind of appreciate that Ubisoft didn't try to perpetuate sort of the vibe that people were getting off of the first couple trailers and actually showed the game for what it is. I mean, I think Ubisoft is happy to do that as well because now they're not going to lose 30% of their sales from the people who were pissed off about it in the United States. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed in Far Cry 5 after its E3 showing. I mean, look, I like Far Cry a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to have a good time playing it. It's just not as pondering as I thought it was initially. It's a little more kind of cut and dried and straightforward, and it still has a lot of comedy in it to kind of take the edge off of things, which I had kind of thought maybe they were getting away from, but that was
I was kind of hoping they would, but
well, just the tonal shift from the initial teaser to like taking out, I guess what you would call an outpost. There's just the tonal shift from those two things. It was like a bit like, oh, okay, this is more Far Cry. I didn't know exactly what I expected, but yeah. So like, okay, so I'm not gonna pick that. That was kind of a non-pick there. But I would say my third pick was probably the new Wolfenstein game. I didn't play any Wolfenstein games until a month ago. I bought the Old Blood and I played that and I really liked it. And then I just heard online it's like, oh, that's like the so-so game. The New Order is where it's at. Yeah, and so luckily there was an E3 sale on PSN, so I bought that, and I'm almost done with the New Order, and it's just it's so much fun, and I love like very few first-person games do a good job of balancing good gunplay and good stealth. Just because stealth is so hard to do in first person, like can they see me? Am I in their peripheral? Like
right.
Yeah, and the funny thing is about this game is there's no meter above anyone's head telling you whether or not they can see you, but it works really well. Like they kind of telegraph if they can kind of see you, and they give you a chance to hide again and correct that. If they do, they'll be like, "Huh, what's that over there?" And you get a second chance without them having a meter flashing above their head. And the stealth sections are fun. It feels great. It's such a brutal game, like dual welding assault rifles and just running through a place saying screw this. Like my stealth plan completely fell apart. Now I'm just taking 2 assault rifles and you're just running straight and just mowing down Nazis, and it's just it's so much fun.
I'll tell you what, killing Nazis never gets old.
Yeah,
I was talking to someone about this the
doesn't.
other day. It's just like no matter how many Nazis you put in front of me, I'll just continuously mow them down. Like
I thought that was one enemy that would never be a sacred cow. I was like, everybody, everyone can agree that Nazis are some of the worst people to ever walk the earth, and yet here we are with there were people complaining about the way they were portrayed in the Wolfenstein 2 media that came out at E3. It's like, no, like this is one group of people everyone should feel absolutely great killing. Yeah. And Evan, great eye, because this is one of the most special games at E3 2017. I have already heaped praise on it on our Best of E3 awards, and that's why I left it off my list. But
I'm very happy to hear that.
Something very, very special, and people are going to be really surprised by it. And I think with the last Wolfenstein, that was the same way. Like a lot of people, I think, wrote it off and was like, "Oh, it's just trying to revive an old franchise." No, it was something very, very special, even more so than the Doom reboot that Bethesda just did. And I have a feeling a lot of people bought the game on that sale, and I think this game's going to do real well for Bethesda, both critically and commercially. And yeah, I think you did a good job plucking one of the most important games of E3 2017 out of the pile.
It's one of the best things about Bethesda is where they're actually giving the developers the room to let these projects grow. Like I never expected Doom to be as good as it was, but they let that grow in the right way. And Wolfenstein was the same way. Like I think Machine Games that make it right. Like every single interview that you see them in, they're constantly praising Bethesda on the fact that they just said, no, you don't have to put multiplayer in this. You don't have to do anything for the norm, like what everyone else is used to seeing in video games. Like, I would never in a million years expect someone to be taking acid on the Bethesda stage and like picking up this cartoon lizard and talking to it while he's in the middle of a firefight. It's just like, what the hell is going on? But it looks great.
Yeah. We also think about Bethesda with Doom. They built an original version of Doom that was
and they scrapped it, right?
Right. And the game was like almost done. So the things that you said about Bethesda about, being patient and making sure that their products are up to scratch before they get them out. I mean, I don't think there's another publisher in the industry that's more willing to do that. And it's more dedicated to its IP, too, because it could have just said, hey, Doom's an old franchise. It's not really relevant anymore. We gave it a whirl. It wasn't working. Let's just cancel it and not worry about it. Instead, they're like, no. We believe in this IP. We're just going to scrap this game that we spent literally probably tens of millions of dollars building, and we're going to do it all over. And it worked. Doom ended up doing well, both with critics and at retail, and it paid off. So, yeah, I have a lot of respect for them.
That we're talking about Wolfenstein and Doom in 2017.
Right.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? But that's a testament
to
Bethesda. I mean, it
really
has this IP and it's stuck with it, and it's ensured that there's putting out quality releases based on both of them. So, more power to them,
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So Vin, what is your first standout game of E3 2017?
My first standout game is a small indie game which had a pretty short trailer. It was only like 30 seconds or something during the Xbox showcase, and that is The Last Night. And a lot of people that know me and the sort of work that I like to do, and it's a lot of pixel art, which I do basically. But this game looks absolutely gorgeous. I've never seen anyone do something like this with pixel art, and just the artwork alone just completely grabbed me. But what it is, it's basically like a side-scrolling sort of noir game. They're really hesitant to call it cyberpunk, even though it's clearly a cyberpunk game.
Blatantly cyberpunk.
I know. They're arguing it, saying no, it's not cyberpunk. It's this of it. It's like, shut up. No, it's definitely cyberpunk. It looks like something straight out of the Blade Runner, and it just looks absolutely incredible. But it actually started out as a 6-day indie game jam, which they did back for a cyberpunk jam, which is even more funny and ironic. If you think about it. But yeah, basically they did that, and they went on to make a full project out of it. But what they've done, they actually use pixel art within a 3D engine, and so it's actually got levels to it, and you can see into the distance, and it's got sort of field blur and stuff like this. So it's actually got a lot of depth to it. But I've never actually seen anyone do this sort of thing with pixel art. It's just so nice to see a studio take an art style which you thought was sort of dead, well, not dead, but overly used, and you sort of thought everyone's figured out everything to do with this art style, which is pixel art. But no, these guys have actually taken it and changed it, made it more modern, and it just looks absolutely incredible with the light effects.
It's definitely visually unique, and it stands out in a sea of pixel art games.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a lot of controversy around the game too, which should help
there is.
Kind of elevate itself above the rank and file, because I think that's a big issue for a lot of indie developers, is that there are so many games. I mean, middleware is so good now; it's so easy to make a video game that it's hard to get above the noise. And so, the developer, the guy who worked on this game, had a somewhat nefarious history on social media. And,
let's do feminism and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that he expected the game to have the impact that it did. And suddenly when people started talking about it and saying, oh, wow, this game, and people started digging into him a little bit, it became a mad scramble for him to go and start deleting a lot of things off his social media that he was afraid the other 70% of customers wouldn't be too pleased about. So it's kind of interesting how politics are really starting to play into...
It is.
I mean, I hope it doesn't affect the creativity of the games that these people are making, but even on a social level, it's interesting how a lot of these developers are at the point now where they have to mind their P's and Q's, even for a little indie game like this game, which I agree looks absolutely stunning. But I just don't. I guess there's no avoiding politics with the kind of how divisive they've been over the last year or so. So
for sure, I like the way I look at this game is a similar way the way I look at Fez with Phil Fish. There's a lot of people that hate Phil Fish and are completely against the guy for things that he said in the past, or how he's reacted to certain statements from certain people, especially of course Marcus Beer, from that old saga. That was always good times. But
yeah, I'm glad I left GT when that happened. I had left GT the week before or something like that, and I just remember just wiping my brow and being like, shoo, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that one. Yeah, because, with Marcus, it was, you never knew what you were going to get, and I think that's why people liked him, and that's why they wanted to watch the show, because, you never knew what he was going to say, and he didn't care if you agreed with it, disagreed with it, thought it was controversial or not. And he's always going to stand his ground. And I always stood beside him as well. You know, a lot of times I would get called into the office and they'd be like, hey, you know, Marcus did this, Marcus did that. And I would always just tell him, I'm like, that's why 120,000 people watch Invisible Walls every week, because of Marcus. And you know, the conversations that we get into, we tackle games differently than other podcasts. And if you take that away, we lose our USP for Invisible Walls, which was that we tackled tough topics. We weren't afraid to debate and get heated over things. You know, we were like the anti-political correct podcast. And so I had to use that argument a lot to keep Marcus around because and you know, he was going to a lot of events back then, and there were stories coming out of events and things like that. And you know, I think I literally had to talk with my boss about Marcus like 5 or 6 different times where
that's
he's
great.
Like, and every time my boss was like, I trust you, and I know you get it, and obviously the show's really successful, and it's doing great. But it was also funny, too, because, you know, Invisible Walls would do 120,000 views a week or whatever, and but then we put up a trailer that would do, like, 2 million. And my boss would be like, well, are you guys really doing all that great? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Right. I don't know what the numbers are for other podcasts, but I know for our original content, this is doing really freaking well. So it was always an interesting battle to take up there.
That is curious, yeah. But yeah, like that's how I'm gonna sort of treat this game as well. I'm gonna look at it as the Phil Fish saga all over again. Even though the man behind it might not be the most perfect person, you know, the game still might be great. So I'm gonna.
And I think that's what we have to keep in mind with this too, is that
for sure, yeah.
As this happens, and it's probably going to keep happening for the next 4 years, probably. Until some kind of a resolution is drawn and people can kind of get along with each other again. But I think we need to separate the people from the games a little bit. I saw someone in the industry posted something on Facebook a couple weeks ago, and they asked a question to everyone. They were like, if you found out that your favorite music artist, your favorite band or whatever, you discovered that their personal beliefs were completely opposite of yours, would you stop supporting that artist? Would you quit listening to their music? Would you stop going to see them play live? And it was like split 50-50 between people that are like, well, I guess a lot of it was like, it depends on what it is, you know?
Yeah, that's bad.
But I disagree with that. Like, if you like the art that someone's creating, I feel like you need to separate the person from the art in a lot of ways.
For sure. I mean, it was a bit different. Like, if we got around to playing the last night and it had like a load of his beliefs within the story or whatever, then that's a different aspect to it. But for the most part,
if they're trying to push the political agenda,
if it's a separate thing. Right. If it's a separate thing, then it shouldn't be an issue. You know, if the game's great, then the game's great. Period. Like, I don't understand why.
It's not an easy question though, because if you look at it from the perspective of the people who are angry over Far Cry, a lot of the people weren't necessarily like alt-right neo-Nazis. They were just religious people who were like, and you know, some of those people were unwilling to accept that, you know, their religion is being perverted by a certain segment of people. But a lot of people just don't like it when they get criticism in any way. And I think people are afraid that other people can't separate the extremism from the more moderate part of whatever you're talking about. And I think that was a fear for a lot of Christians with Far Cry 5, is that some people may play the game and say, this is the way all Christians are. Instead of knowing that, you know, it's just this very small segment of Christians who act this way. And it's, you know, there's so much gray area there. There's no right answer. I wouldn't blame anybody. Like, you know, you said you were surprised to see that 50% of the people said that they wouldn't, you know, consume that art after that. But I have a hard time really criticizing someone for taking that stance, because everyone's different. Everyone has things that are taken more personally for them versus other people. And, you know, as much as we try to, we really cannot put ourselves in other people's shoes. It's just impossible. You don't know them. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know what they've seen in their lives. So I try not to be too sort of vindictive towards people that I don't necessarily agree with. There are certain lines that I won't cross. Anyone who says the Nazis are okay, we've got a problem, you know. We've got a big problem. And but, you know, when someone, you know, you talk again about Far Cry 5, if there's someone who's a Christian and is a little nervous about maybe, you know, and they get it. They get that it's a small segment of Christianity that sort of perverts their beliefs. But I think they're afraid they can't trust other people to not be able to draw that same line in the sand, and I get that. So yeah, good point. No, I'm looking forward to it. It should be. I think it's coming out on Xbox, PC, and Mac at first, but maybe it'll. I don't know if it's ever going to cross over to the PS4 because it's under Xbox ID, so I'm not too sure how that's going to pan out. But maybe Oh, it will. It will eventually. Eventually, that deal will expire, and they'll be able to get it to all the other platforms.
I hope so.
It happens with pretty much every indie game that's quote unquote exclusive or timed exclusive or whatever. So I think it'll make it eventually to other platforms.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So Shane, what is your second pick?
My second pick is The Crew 2. Ubisoft's
The Crew 2. I was not expecting that at all from you.
Neither was I.
Ubisoft's open world driving game. I feel really what held this game back at E3 is that it wasn't playable.
Right.
They
I was
put
going to
out.
say we saw this really fancy trailer, and it was a bit of what's the game actually like to play?
Well, they did They did put out some raw gameplay, like 2 days after the debut. They put out some raw gameplay, and again, that stuff I don't trust 100% because it can be doctored. They're developers playing; they can manipulate it to make sure it looks really good. It's the concepts behind the game that I really like. Like, you remember games like MotorStorm that kind of let you partake in various motorsport disciplines, or even Steep in another way.
You can pick any vehicle and you can go at it, sort of thing.
Right, but the difference with The Crew 2 is that you swap all that stuff on the fly. So it's not like this awkward, okay, there's this event, now I choose a boat. There's this event, now I choose a motorbike. You can swap those things as the game is going, and that to me is a huge difference. And a huge change from the way racing games have been. Coming out of E3, I mean, trying to pick the best driving game of E3 was like, they're all the freaking same. It's like, you have Project Cars 2, you have Forza Motorsport 7, you have Gran Turismo Sport. Like, what really separates all those games? One has better graphics and audio. One has like a slightly more robust competitive scene with Gran Turismo Sport. Project Cars is, big car library. It's really splitting hairs when you decide which game you like better, and a lot of times you just say, well, this one has the better graphics. So then, I mean, honestly, that's really the reason Forza Motorsport won, best driving game of E3 2017 from me, because it ultimately separated itself with this technology. And I feel like The Crew 2 it looks great. I mean, don't get me wrong, its graphics are actually absolutely mind-blowing. But what separates it for me is the mechanics and the change in how you approach an open world game. And I feel like the first Crew, it was a good effort, but I feel like a lot of the ideas that were more unique kind of fell flat and weren't fleshed out well enough. And it looks like this one is doing that in addition to kind of having this unique mechanics. So if the game was playable, it's hard to say with a certainty until you play a game, but if it worked as advertised, or ultimately works as advertised, it would have easily won driving game of E3 for me. And I just don't want it to kind of slip through the cracks and have the show end and people not realize that it could be something really special.
Yeah, that's one thing I always do have to doff my hat off at Ubisoft for, is the fact that they're always, considering how big of a sort of publisher they are, they don't always stick to the norm. They are actually trying out a lot of new stuff a lot of the time, and I always try and credit them on that. So it does sound pretty cool though. Like I'm definitely curious to check it out now myself.
Yeah,
I mean, the driving genre is teetering on irrelevance at this point.
Right, exactly.
Like
you're doing the same thing over and over.
It needs a shot in the arm, and I feel like this game could be that. So
if it had a crash mode, I'd sign up right away.
There was a new sort of destruction derby type game that was announced right before E3.
Yeah.
Are you serious? I didn't know about this. Wait.
Are you talking about the... it's basically the people that worked on Burnout, and they did the golf game, and then they...
No. This is called Wreckfest. And it literally is just like a destruction derby clone.
Oh, interesting.
That's great.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I remember playing that game on the PS1 with them.
It was like one of the few good launch games for PlayStation 1 in the States. And me and my buddies, we would just sit around and drink beer and play that game for like hours and hours.
Yeah.
No jumping flash? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, we did not play that. We played a lot of Tekken as well back in the day. But you should check it out, Evan. It's basically just an HD version of Destruction Derby with modern tech. So
interesting.
I'm all over that.
Definitely.
At least it's something different.
Sweet. Cool. So, Evan, what's your second pick?
My second pick is Super Mario Odyssey. I didn't have a GameCube or a Wii, so...
Wow.
Yeah, I totally walked away from Nintendo stuff, and the only reason I own a Wii U is because I got one for free, and I'm glad I did, because it got me back interested in Nintendo, and it made me feel bad. I'm like, oh, the Wii U it has some great games, and I'm actually not even talking about a Wii U game, but I picked up. So basically, it's backwards compatible. So last year, I was like, you know what? I need to play these Galaxy games. Everyone's talking about them. So I played through Galaxy 1 last August, maybe, and I just picked up about 2 weeks ago Galaxy 2, and I finished it. And man, those 3D Mario games are so much fun. Like the core team that makes Mario games, just the idea, the one-off ideas they'll just throw in just because the levels are colorful. The level design is it's so much fun to play around in these worlds. Like, and especially with Galaxy, it's there's all these floating balls of like that have their own gravitational pull, and they do so much with those worlds, and it kind of gives them the opportunity just to do anything they want, because it's you're going from galaxy to galaxy, and they play with the physics in such interesting ways. It's just, that if there's a 3D Mario game, it's going to be a great game, because their pedigree it's almost perfect. And
I think also, I don't know how much gameplay you watched of Odyssey, but they put out a ton. I mean, they literally showed like 3 hours of the game throughout E3, and you're seeing all those elements that you're talking about. They're all in Odyssey. They're all there. There's gravity-based gameplay, all the little changes and tweaks. There's some stuff from Super Mario Sunshine in there. All those elements that you've seen them add to that franchise over time, they're all kind of culminating in Odyssey. And again, it's my game of the show. And that's a big part of it. Like, you see it building on that. You already know all the other stuff is great, and that team has really not let me down with any of its new ideas. So
right, that's why
like
I'm excited.
It's a cumulative effect, and you know that they're polished. And I mean, my only real caveat with the game is that it's not particularly pretty in a lot of instances. It can look really barren and kind of bland a lot of times, but that's when the gameplay comes through and saves the day. So
yeah, totally. I'd say like, even playing Galaxy 2, I mean, it's a Wii game, so it's literally rough around the edges, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the gameplay, even with that horrible Wiimote and nunchuck, which I hate so much, it's just the controls are pixel perfect in a 3D world. But yeah, it's just, and also the last game, Super Mario 3D World, which is a bit. It's more different than
my
Galaxy
least favorite 3D
Odyssey.
Mario game, by the way.
Man, that's, you know what? I actually like that game better than both Galaxy games.
Really?
Yeah, I'm kind of an outlier, because the only thing I've never heard anyone say that they like 3D World better than the Galaxy games. I've never heard anyone say that, and having just played through both Galaxy games in the last 8 months, I kind of just sat down for a second and just thinking over those last three Mario games I played, 3D World included. I'm like, you know what? I kind of like 3D World better. That's to say nothing about the quality of the Galaxy games. They are great 9 out of 10 games for me. But I just like 3D World a bit more. But I'm happy to get back into a game that's a bit more, like Super Mario 64, where there's kind of like a hub world, and you're going around to all these like very, very stylistically and aesthetically different worlds, and playing with the mechanics that each world has in it, and especially with the hat and being able to become enemies and stuff. It's just like they just added another level to another unique thing to Mario, and I just look at that and like, man, Sonic, they can't do anything like Mario.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Just like Mario just keeps innovating and doing something new and adding another layer, and it's just like, yeah. But, yeah.
I thought that 3D World was the first step back for 3D Mario games, because I felt like it took away a lot of the freedom that you had in prior 3D Mario games. It felt a little more structured, like the side-scrolling Mario games, and there was a lot more side-scrolling in the game as well.
It has a lot more to do with the 2D games than the 3D games, really.
Yeah, and that's why it didn't hit me as well. It's still a great game. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's an amazing game. But we're really talking about like the creme de la creme of video games here.
Right.
Like, I even enjoyed Super Mario Sunshine more than 3D World, and I know I go against the grain a little bit there with some Mario fans, but
yeah, for sure.
But it gave me more freedom. I felt like I was in like a living world instead of these compartmentalized levels, so to speak, that I felt like I was getting in 3D World, and that aesthetic is coming back with Super Mario Odyssey. Like, some of the levels aren't really even platforming levels per se. They're more like there's some light platforming. You need to do it to get to where you need to get, but it's more about discovery and finding things. And I feel like in general that franchise has got away from that a little bit over the last few entries. So I'm all over
you're not just
Odyssey.
racing to the goal,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to criticize. Well, compare them, I would even say, because they're all 10 out of 10 games, and they're all. It's hard to say which one's better than the other for the most part. I mean, every time I play a Mario game, it's always a great experience. So hopefully Odyssey will sort of carry on that trend at least.
This is the game that I'm buying a Switch for, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it's sold.
And I don't think you'll be disappointed, by the way.
I don't think I will either.
I think we got to pick up. I mean, did you play Zelda on the Wii U, or did you not play it at all?
I played it on the Wii U. Yeah, did all 120 shrines, like 108 hours in that game. Yeah, and
wow.
In thinking hindsight being 2020, I wish I didn't know Zelda would have been worth buying the Switch, and now that the DLC and stuff is coming on, it's like, oh man, I wish I would have played it on the Switch. But it's like, I'm not playing that game over. I've played it to death.
No,
I'm happy for the DLC and stuff, but I'm not doing 120 shrines over. But yeah, definitely looking forward to Super Mario Odyssey, like probably over any other game coming out this year.
Yeah, looks great.
And all right, Vin, what is your second pick?
My second pick is Skull and Bones from Ubisoft, which is a sort of spin-off from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and it's actually made by Ubisoft Singapore. And the reason why I picked this game more than anything is the fact that Singapore is sort of getting the limelight for once, because they have worked on Assassin's Creed for years. They basically made all of the naval combat stuff in Assassin's Creed 3 and 4. They did all that stuff. None of Montreal pretty much did any of that. They also worked on like the World War I section of Syndicate and stuff. So they always
that's
do,
like my favorite part of Syndicate.
Yeah. And exactly, right? So, like, everyone's favorite parts of Assassin's Creed are done by Singapore for the most part. And I was really happy when I found out about this game, because I actually saw this game in action 2 years ago when I was down in Singapore. I was actually at the Ubisoft studio, and I saw Origins back then. I saw Skull and Bones back then as well. And they were in really early stages, but I knew about them back then. And when they were like, oh, this is the next Assassin's Creed, but like, don't show anyone or tell anyone about it. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's obviously your biggest game. But when they showed me Skull and Bones, I was like, this is way bigger. Like, if this gets out, then yeah, I'm way more excited about this. And I think Assassin's Creed 4 fans are going to be pleasantly surprised by it. But it's basically taken the whole naval combat of Black Flag and turned it into a multiplayer game. So it's sort of doing what they did with For Honor, which is turned it into sort of like a team-based tactical thing. But you can play the game solo as well, which is super exciting. But I'm just excited to become a pirate again. You know, like I was super. Everyone slept on this almost. It felt like at E3, everyone's like, yeah, Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm like, dude, Skull and Bones, did you see it? But
I think my one caveat with Skull and Bones is that I wish it would have fleshed out the boarding a little more and made it a little... Because I feel like the next evolution of sort of that game design would be to flesh out, once you've sort of disabled a ship and you board it, that to me should be the element that should be blown out a little more. I didn't see a lot of that in the E3.
That's the thing.
Demo.
I don't know if they're gonna. I don't know if they were just showing the multiplayer off specifically for the showing this year. Because sometimes they do that. They just throw one feature at E3 and say this is what we're gonna sell. Like Call of Duty always does that. When they're showing the game, they always show something specific, like this is the multiplayer this time. Like that's what they did at this year's E3, and we didn't see any campaign stuff. I think there was some behind closed doors, but there wasn't any for the public to see. Which, maybe they're doing that, and I sort of hope that is the case, and maybe there's more boarding, because there definitely was boarding on it when I saw it 2 years ago, but they might have taken that out just to.
Well, same with Battlefront too. Everyone thought we were going to get the big campaign reveal at E3, and like they showed it behind closed doors, but did not show it to the public.
It's a huge shame. But I'm really hoping that Skull and Bones actually turns into something as great as it could be. And especially the fact that Singapore are getting their sort of limelight, which they fully deserve, because so many studios that are under Ubisoft's sort of umbrella go completely unnoticed, even though they are working hard on these games. Like even myself, I was working at Ubisoft Osaka, and we were all working on South Park with San Francisco. Jointly, we were doing equally as much as each other. Like most of the artwork was getting processed and done through the Osaka studio, and most people don't know that because it's not sort of publicly put out there for everyone to know. And it's sort of cool that
and no one watches the credits.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I know, right? Everyone just skips through that. Yeah, whatever, who cares? But now that sort of Ubisoft Singapore have got that limelight, I'm super excited to see where that studio goes, because they've done some really interesting stuff in the past, especially with just Assassin's Creed. But I'm hoping that they sort of carry on that trend and do some really great things. So Skull and Bones is on my list big time.
It's been getting a lot of hype out of the show, so
Yeah, I'm hoping that it does well. I really am.
Yeah, I'm happy to see where it goes. I just hope it's a bit more than just like you are basically the boat and you're destroying other boats. And I'm sure there's more.
Yeah,
there's more
I'm
layers
sure,
to it.
I'm sure you can get off the boat and you can go and do like your piratey stuff, and I hope that stuff is in there.
Like you can
If it's
dock
not,
and
it might
stuff.
be a bit
Yeah.
of a disappointment, but
yeah,
for the
because
most part,
I have seen tons of PC games that are just that. It's just
for sure,
pirate ships in the ocean blasting each other with cannons. So
Yeah.
it's E3. It's like you said, you can only focus on so much. You don't want to muddy the message too much.
Right.
Really, all they had to get out there was, hey, this is an entire game of Assassin's Creed pirate combat. And
Yeah.
they
Amen.
succeeded at that. So we'll see as the months roll on. It doesn't come out till next year, so there's
it's still a
there's
while
still
off, I
next
think,
there's next
but-
E3 still for them to really blow
sure.
out some of the more features. But yeah, I agree. Auspicious debut for that game.
Cool. So Shane, what is your third and final pick for E3 2017?
My last pick, and again, I'm picking games that I didn't really cover heavily on our Best of E3, and my last game is Ni no Kuni 2.
Oh, awesome.
Ooh.
I played the first Ni no Kuni for a while. I think I got about 15 or 20 hours into it, and other games came calling, and I wasn't reviewing it for GT, so I had to switch off and do something else. And I liked the concepts behind it. Like, I kind of liked the Pokemon light gameplay elements to it. The other element for me that really has me resonating with Ni no Kuni 2 is that it feels Japanese without feeling like a JRPG.
Oh,
if
you
that
mean
makes
like in the
any sense.
archaic sense?
No, just in it feels like a JRPG that was developed in the West.
Okay.
It's
okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's an action RPG. It still kind of has those elements of JRPGs, kind of the melodrama, but it's not overwrought. The combat in the game is great. It feels tight. It feels good. The art is, I mean, the art, I don't even know if I have to talk about the art.
It looks like a Studio Ghibli game.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, it would have been one of my runners-up. It would have been one of my 5 nominees for Best Graphics of E3 2017. From an artistic standpoint, if we had an award for Most Artistic Game, it would have won hands down. So I feel like all the elements that I liked about the first game have been evolved a good bit to make them something that resonates a little bit more with me. I like that it hasn't lost its heritage completely as a JRPG. You get those vibes from it. But I also like that it doesn't have that stigma of being a JRPG. I think that was my biggest gripe with Persona 5, was that it felt like a stereotypical JRPG in too many places. And Ni no Kuni 2 really, really skirts around kind of those aesthetics to make a game that I think is going to be relevant to the modern age. And it could strike beyond the people that bought Persona 5. I think people that like Persona 5 will love it, but I think it could reach a wider audience than that. The boss fights are great, and really interesting and unique, and they're not just beat this guy's hit points down. There's an interesting strategy you have to take to topple the bosses. I just think it's a total package, and when I think about Japanese games, in a lot of ways, this is kind of the best, especially JRPGs, it's kind of the best thing that I could hope for as far as that subgenre is concerned. So I'm really excited for it. I have a feeling I'm going to play this one all the way through instead of just the first 15 or 20 hours. And I hope that people will get on board with it, because from what I played at E3, it's worth watching until it comes out later this year. I think it comes out like November 10th.
November 10th.
Oh, already? Wow. Yeah,
November is crazy this year.
Oh,
Yeah,
October
it is.
and November together. It's
Yeah. October 7th is like October 7th and November 10th.
Yeah. It's like Shadow of War comes out on my birthday this year. Like, it's rough.
it's quite the birthday present.
But it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. Like, the first world problems for sure. Like,
Yep.
But yeah, it's going to be a crazy year. I'm really excited.
Yeah, but like Ni no Kuni 2, like I beat the first Ni no Kuni and absolutely loved it. I will say, Shane, towards the end of that game, it hits the JRPG grind. Like, you got to grind that game out. And I just barely beat the last boss. Even there's an enemy that pops up in a certain area of the game. This is so 16-bit, like SNES era JRPG stuff. But there's a certain enemy that only pops up every now and then. But if you beat it, it'll run away as well, of course. But if you
Yeah.
beat it, you'll net a huge ton of experience. So I would spend like 2 hours a day just running back and forth in the same area until the guy would show up and get into a battle to beat him, just so I could, like raise my familiar levels so that I could actually, take on the last area of the game. But yeah, everything
Persona
about
5's like that too. It's like the end of that game, literally after the last save point that you have, the last safe house, like that section of the game can be easy or it can be darn near impossible, just depending on which enemies spawn, which ones they decide to face you with, and in what order they spawn, because there's no save point. So sometimes it's better if like the most difficult enemies you take on first. It'll give you time to heal or whatever, and then you can kind of mop up the rest of it. And that's how I finally finished the game. I just got lucky with how the enemies spawned. And
that sucks. I mean, it's like after 100 hours, it's like you really didn't need to throw this at me. Like, come on.
No, it was bullshit. I yelled F you at the TV at least 20 times in like a 3-day period it took me 3 days to finish that last section of the game, from the last save point to finishing the game. 3 days.
Jesus.
That sucks. Man, I bought that game like 6 months ago and I've only played about 5 hours of it. I was like, yeah, I'm one of the first, and then I just like, I don't know.
And the last.
Yeah, you never
I was like the first to have it, and then now I'm the only one who hasn't finished it at this point.
Yeah.
But
I think there's a lot of people out there who haven't finished that game.
Sure.
Yeah, I haven't bought it yet because I know it's a bit of a B-side. It's definitely a dry season game for me.
I'll get into it.
I would bet that 70% of the people who bought that game have not finished it.
No, for sure.
Probably not.
Because there are just so many times where you think it's over and you get that sense of relief. And you're like, oh, thank God, finally. And then, nope, something else happens. And it's usually some corny story twist or whatever that you don't really care about. And then you're like, okay, well, this will be the last section of the game. Nope, something else stupid happens. I don't. Maybe 30% completion may even be a little high.
Oh well. Well, Ni no Kuni's out in November, so I'm sure we'll all try it out and play it. I'm really surprised the first one hasn't got a remaster yet, actually. That is something that I would have thought would have came along straight away, because it came out quite near the end of the last generation, didn't it? So
yeah, but it also doesn't really need one. It also looks amazing, you know.
Yeah, the PS3 version looks amazing, but I think there's a lot of sort of Xbox 360 converters that switched over to PS4 and never got a chance to play it.
No, you're right. Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame, you know, considering, because it is a masterpiece of a game in terms of art style alone, and the fact that it came up to a contemporary sort of audience this late on into the PS3. It's a shame, but hopefully we'll get a remaster further down the line so more people can check it out. But yeah, super excited about the second one. But Evan, what is your third and final pick?
This is probably not a surprise to Vin, but
is it something to do with Shadow of a big?
Are there colossi and shadows? Are they casting shadows? Yes.
What are the odds?
Yes, they are. Yeah, Shadow of the Colossus remake.
I figured.
It's my favorite game of all time. And it's so hypocritical of me, because I was just talking about how everything seems samey. Like, oh, Far Cry is Far Cry, and Assassin's Creed is Assassin's Creed, and Lost Legacy is Uncharted 4. But yeah, like
But it's your favorite game ever.
It's my favorite game ever, and why would I pass up the chance to play a remake, not even a port?
Right. Yeah, that is
the
a big
HD.
deal.
Like even when we saw what was it, the leak came out that they were doing something with the trademark for Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, the trademark registration.
I didn't expect this, and a lot of people at first were like, "Oh, is this a remaster?" It's like, no. Like the second you see Wander's run animation, you know that this is a ground up remake. And I just played through the first Uncharted, which is a Blue Point remaster, and
well, Blue Point did the remasters for the PS3 versions of Eco and Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah,
it's the same guys.
It makes me feel.
I feel bad for those guys because they're so talented, but they're so
work
good
is so underappreciated.
at remastering stuff that it's like that's what you do. You're good at it. Like you're gonna keep doing it.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very.
I bet they get paid out the ears for it, though. Yeah. To be fair, like I'm not.
It's like, hey, remember
I'm
that?
Sure they get compensated.
Remember that remaster you did? Now you're gonna remake it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it should help in speed wise, because they should have all the assets to start building off of already sitting on their hard drives, and obviously they know the game probably better than anyone other than Team Eco, so it's the right choice. One thing to keep in mind though is that video that they showed was not actually the game. It was a proof of concept.
Yeah, that is definitely pre-rendered.
CG
that
thing
was
that
one
they
of the
did.
things that I saw. But at the same time, even though I know that it is Bluepoint, and I know they always do a good job on remasters, so I'm not too worried about that, I would say. But yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, just if I get the chance to play a remake of that game, it's I'm going to take it, and I hope more people
must be
play
nice. Must be nice, Evan. Hey, getting your favorite game remastered.
Yeah,
must be nice.
How is there no like remake Eco Shadow of the Colossus collection? I'm surprised.
Dude, honestly, when I saw the trailer, I started getting text messages and messages from friends that know I'm like the biggest like Eco fan in the world, and like, oh my god, Shadow of the Colossus remake, and I'm like, yeah, screw you guys. Like, I was super bitter that day. I was not happy whatsoever. I was like, are you serious? You're making a remaster of Shadow of the Colossus, but you're not throwing Eco in there with it? I hate you guys. And I was super, like, I refused to be excited about this game, but like the more I see it popping up and people are actually talking about it, I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm probably gonna buy it. But still, like, no Eco remaster. Where's that?
I think a big thing for the Shadow of the Colossus remake too is that it is going to open the game up to a whole new audience, because
for sure. And it
like
was
you
way
mentioned
more
earlier,
popular,
Evan, like a lot of people who own PS4s now were on Xbox 360 last generation, and so they've had no opportunity to play this game at all, and it'll probably end up selling better than any version of Shadow of the Colossus before.
Definitely with that install base, and
It'll probably sell better than The Last Guardian, I would even say.
Oh yeah,
There was a lot of hype for The Last Guardian that came from all the people that actually played the Shadow of the Colossus, and now that's just going to perpetuate. And
it also
I
won't
wouldn't be
take
surprised.
much to sell better than The Last Guardian. I mean, that
Sure,
game.
it didn't do very well.
I mean, in the end of the day, that was pretty much a thank you letter from Sony to Sony fans. Financially, it was a complete and utter disaster. Imagine spending 10 years developing a game and have it sell like 300,000 copies. I mean,
that
There you go, ask Square Enix, they're getting good at that.
that is brutal.
because for all its faults, like I really really loved The Last Guardian.
So did I.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. It doesn't
Yeah, I
seem
enjoyed
like
it.
people. A lot of times with games like that, they get reviewed and they get kind of mediocre to vaguely positive reviews, and then months later, people look back and say, "Oh, actually, you know what? That game was great." But I haven't really seen that with The Last Guardian. It seems like
Right.
the more as time has gone on, the more critical of it people have been, which seems odd to me. But like I said earlier, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, just really looking forward to that. Obviously, that's way down the pipeline, but just seeing that, even that proof of concept, I just reminding me of playing that game on the PlayStation 2 and just being absolutely in awe of the scale of that game. And
I don't know if it'll be all that long to wait either. I mean, if you look at Bluepoint's track record, it hits its release dates generally. And I know they didn't give us one per se for when this remake is going to hit, but Bluepoint doesn't mess around, man. They get their projects done, and they get them done really well. So I wouldn't even be surprised if we end up playing this like end of the year next year or early 2019.
I would say 2018, the end of holiday season, probably.
That would be great.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I see it.
The
That would be
perfect Christmas present for me.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So wrapping this up, last one, Vin. What is your final game?
My final game is the Eco remaster coming out on the PS4. That's not a real game.
Wishful
Why
thinking.
isn't it Bluepoint? Yeah.
Eco sold really poorly, though. I mean,
Yeah, it
Shadow
did.
of the
I'm
Colossus
not
didn't
gonna
set the
expect
sales
them.
charts on fire, but Eco wasn't even hardly a blip, so I can
Yeah,
see why.
it's all down to sales. Yeah, I know that. But God, where's
Yeah,
my
I know. I
remaster?
hear you.
But my final pick is actually Call of Duty World War II, and I wasn't actually interested in this game that much, to be honest. Because I haven't played Call of Duty in years. That's the main reason why I was never really hyped about it. I haven't played Call of Duty since Black Ops 2. I think was the last one I bought.
Well, that was the best one, so you ended on a high note.
Yeah, too true.
In my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, it was a great game, and I played Call of Duty every single year ever since Modern Warfare 1. I bought it. I bought World at War, which was probably my favorite Call of Duty, I would say. I had probably the most fun with my friends on it, and then it just from there, year in, year out, and then after Black Ops 2, I was like, this isn't doing it for me, this whole space suit flying around thing. I'm not into this. But going back and seeing the multiplayer sort of side to it for World War II, this E3, it actually surprisingly got me quite hyped because of the the whole part where you're not jumping around like a spaceman, you're not flying off walls. I mean, I've just played Titanfall 2 as well recently, over the last couple of weeks, and while that's a great game, it's still, it's all this fancy stuff happening, and I'm just
complicated.
Like, I just want to shoot
It's
right.
Extra layer of stuff you have to master.
Exactly, and like, I just want to shoot dudes, man.
I mean, that is what this is. It's point, shoot, kill, pretty much.
Right. And if you mess that up, then I don't know what to say. But like with Modern Warfare 2, World War 2, sorry, all these friggin' names. In World War 2, it's straight back to, as I hate to use their marketing sort of word use, but it's boots on the ground sort of, fast action.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground, yeah. But it's back to that, and I like the fact that it's back to the simple side of it. I just want to shoot dudes and have fun with my friends. I don't want to have to learn how to do crazy wall jumps and do like spins off ladders and stuff to be cool on the internet or whatever. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to.
Well, I think what you saw with Call of Duty that happened over the last 3 or 4 entries was Call of Duty playing to his hardcore fans and his really good players, because. For sure. To them, I think they got bored eventually of the boots on the ground stuff, and we're like, I need something else. I want another layer to this game, and I think it ultimately resulted in better games for Call of Duty, but I think it also limited the appeal, because I feel like already the separation between the really good players and average players was way too high. And then once they added those extra layers on, the disparity just became even worse. I mean, I used to be able to, finish. By the time I put down a Call of Duty, my KD would be around a 1.2, 1.3. This last game, my KD before I gave up was like 0.8.
Wow.
Right, yeah.
And the one before that was like 1. And the one before that was like 1.1. So I've seen my ability to compete decline. And part of it may just be my hand-eye coordination is deteriorating as I get older. That could be it. But I think it's more likely that the separation between the really skilled players, the people who have time to play it all day, every day, and that's what these people do, versus the people who have time to play it when they get home from work every night for a couple hours. It just got so bad that it just became disheartening to the average player.
You don't want to play it.
And look, and a lot of people don't want to admit, like, I'm not good enough, and that's why I don't like this game. But the fact of the matter is, that's the truth. Like, it's just human nature to turn away from something that you're not doing very well at. And I feel like this reboot could level the playing field a little bit. And then it's only about who has the better internet connection. Because that is a big part of Call of Duty. Like, your ping in Call of Duty often is the difference.
It matters big
when
time.
Huge. I mean, I did some video reviews for GT of Call of Duty games where I would clearly show, okay, this is what I saw while I was playing live, and then you watch the replay. It's like, I'm playing live, I pump 2 bursts into an enemy, he doesn't go down, he shoots me once, I die. Then I watched the replay, and according to that player I squared off against, I never even fired my gun. Like, that's where ping comes into play and latency, and that's a problem that's probably going to be there forever, and it always has been. But then you toss in these other crazy mechanics into the mix, and it just makes the separation between the two skill levels just far too severe for people like us to enjoy.
I think that's the major point that I'm trying to get to. I guess is the whole. There's already all these systems that are in place that you have to constantly think about and you have to master. And then when they start adding all these wall running things on there and crazy stuff like that and all these crazy kill streaks and all these
and
other
the slides
subsystems.
And all that stuff.
Yeah, and all the slides and all this sort of stuff. And when you see people doing it, man, it looks badass, but I'm never gonna have enough time in my day to be able to put into that, to get to that point to actually enjoy the game on the same level. And that is down to personal, lifestyle and stuff like that. I get that, but it's like you said, I hope that World War II actually levels that playing field a little bit, and at least I hope I am. I mean, and I'm sort of ready for a World War II game as well. I know a lot of people are sort of rolling their eyes at that, saying, "Oh, another World War II game." It's like, yeah, but I don't want another space shooter as well. So I'm happy to go back instead of forward in that respect. So fingers crossed it'll be a good one. I mean, Sledgehammer apparently did a really good job on Advanced Warfare as well, so hopefully
they did. I mean, that's my favorite modern Call of Duty. I mean, it's my favorite Call of Duty since Black Ops 2 is their last take. So yeah, I have a lot of faith in them to deliver a great game. I will say, watching people play it at E3 and the time that I spent with it was almost like hanging out with an old friend again.
That's good. No, that's what I want though, because World at War was one of my favorites, and I just had such a great time on that game, and I'm hoping that it sort of filters back into that a tiny bit,
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to Call of Duty World War II reboots on the ground.
Reboots on the ground.
Reboots on the ground. Oh, Jesus.
Good one.
Yeah, sorry, Evan. Evan is like completely. Well, he's not against it, but he just doesn't play multiplayer.
I don't care. I can't get into it.
Yeah, I knew that one would be a quiet one for Evan.
Although
the campaign looks good. The campaign looks really good.
Yeah, but then it's like, it's like almost like an afterthought, and it's, and unless I'm paying like $5 for the game, like I feel like there's nothing for me other than the campaign, so I just don't really know.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be more trailers for the campaign leading up to the release.
Well, there hasn't been yet. They haven't shown any of the campaign trailers.
Like they've shown like one trailer-ish sort of thing on the reveal for like how the campaign sort of looks for like the main characters and stuff like that. But we haven't seen anything in depth. So hopefully, when they start showing that stuff off, it's probably in GDC. They'll probably start showing that stuff off.
I also think another point from Evan's perspective, who he may only be interested in playing the campaign, is that Call of Duty campaigns last 5 or 6 hours usually. So spending $60 to play 5 or 6 hours, I mean, you may or may not be into zombies or whatever. But if you're not into if you're not into that, you're not into multiplayer stuff. There's no reason for you to buy a Call of Duty game until it's
take your Shadow of the Colossus and get out of here.
Yeah.
I will happily. But yeah, like some of that stuff, like single player Battlefront 2, like I would be nice to play it, but not for $60. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Titanfall 2 as well. Like maybe one day, but yeah, not yet.
Yeah, well, it's on sale. You could pick it up and fly through the campaign at least.
Right. Maybe.
Cool. So coming up to the end of the podcast, just want to say a massive, massive thank you to the man himself. Thank you for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I've had a blast, guys. I don't know why it took you guys so long to ask me to be on the show, but it was funny. Like
you're too cool for us. That's why.
Oh, come on, please. We were in a chat for one of SIFTD's streams, and someone asked me why I'd never been on the show and if I would consider it. I was like, yeah. I'm like, they've never asked me to be on the show.
I just never.
How we heard about it.
I never figured like. I just never even thought about it just because I thought it would be an impossibility.
No, not at all. I mean, one thing I want to say is, this podcast is one of the things I'm really proud of after founding SIFTD. To see our site inspire others to create. That to me is one of the best compliments that I could have got from starting SIFTD. The community in general, but also people being inspired to go out and do things on their own. And, I would say to anyone listening to this or whatever, go for it. Create your content. Send it to me. If it's good and I like it, we're going to run it. We have a whole channel just for SIFTD community content. Brent does his podcast. You guys do this. If you guys are creating any kind of content out there, we want to support you guys. We want to get your stuff in front of our audience because they love it too. I mean, SIFTD really is like a family, and it's not in the family sense of like two brothers who compete with each other to be better than each other. It's in the sense of a family where you want to lift each other up and see each other doing great things. So, I am more than willing to come on this show again. I'm very thankful that you guys invited me on it finally. I listen to it every single week. Everyone on SIFTD should be as well. You guys are doing an amazing job. And obviously with Vin, I just appreciate everything you've done for the site. All the avatars for our achievements were done by Vin, and he did them all for free. And I just appreciate that very much. So coming on this show is the least I can do. And I also had a blast. I had a great time talking to you guys. So invite me back. I'll come back on whenever I can.
Definitely.
Oh, we definitely will.
And actually, shout out to Erebus Jones because I'm pretty sure he's the one that he sent me a message on SIFTD. He's like, hey, Shane said he'd love to come on Podcast Reload. Get on it right now. I was like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, it was like it was one of them weird sort of like super cuts like between all these people. Like, oh, I heard Shane wants to be on the podcast. Oh, I heard Shane, and then like Evan told me he was like, oh, I heard Shane wants to be on the podcast. Like, all right, I'll email him. And it's just this weird sort of grapevine. So, but yeah, I mean, it was really cool to have you on, man. We really appreciate you curating the podcast every week and doing everything that you do. Like the website's going great. I'm sure everyone will agree. Like everyone's enjoying it still. So, and it's been great for E3. Man, getting through that content is so much easier on the site. So yeah, mad shout out to that. But yeah, we're gonna sign off with any Twitter handles and any goodbyes that you got. Shane, where can people find you? Obviously
I am Dinfire everywhere. Every social media platform. I am at Dinfire. The only thing I am not Dinfire is League of Legends because some jerk took it before me. I don't know how.
Yeah,
It's
how do you
like,
how do you take that unless they knew?
I don't know. Like, honestly, I've been able to get it everywhere except for League of Legends. Somebody else. I mean, it's funny because people hear Din Fire and they think it's a reference to Zelda, Din's Fire. And
okay. Yeah.
the ironic part is it actually has nothing to do with Zelda. My DJ name was Din, and my graffiti name was Fire, and I just combined the two. One day I was like, I need to combine these two. And then later on, like, I played Ocarina of Time, and I was like, oh my god, there's Din's Fire in this. And I was like, perfect. Like, I'm just going to stick with it. So
that's why you like
Din
that
Fire.
game so much.
Yeah. So I'm Din Fire everywhere but League of Legends, where I'm the real Din Fire. And hit me up anywhere.
Verified.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you
awesome.
go.
How about you, Evan?
Well, I'm at the stand user, and I'm pretty sure if I ever played League of Legends, no one would take that name because no one would want it. But yeah, I'm the stand.
You got a 420 or 69 in there somewhere.
Yeah.
A couple of Z's.
yeah. The stand users. The stand user on Twitter, Giant Bomb, and of course SIFTD. And Vin, how about yourself?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter. I am at VinHillArt. You can find me and some of my finger paintings on there from time to time. I'm also on SIFTD, obviously. I'm at VinHill. And where else can you find me? I'm on ArtStation. Go and look on there. There's some paintings and drawings and stuff that I do on there if you're interested in concept art. And yeah, I might be releasing some stuff over the next couple of months. The project which I'm working on at the minute has been announced, so I think they might start dropping all the concept art out slowly. So you might see some stuff on there. But other than that, thank you again for everyone for tuning in and listening to us. We appreciate it. Everyone coming in and week to week. We're now on 42 episodes. I can't believe it's been over a year that we've been doing this, man. It's been pretty crazy. And we now finally got the creator of the site on the show itself. So awesome.
It's inspiring, and should inspire all the other sifters out there, guys. Get to it. You guys can do it.
Indeed. So from everyone here, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. So ta-ta.
Podcast Reload is up and out.
Woohoo!
I should have stole that.
It's all good.
No, it was good. Accurate.
Good episode, guys.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fun talking with you guys.